Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1051 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. Man, I went into this chapter kind of expecting to be disappointed. Not that I wanted to be disappointed, but that was kind of the expectation that I had. That after how the previous chapters left me feeling, it was perhaps unlikely that unless the war started again, that I would really and truly be satisfied by the whole chapter. And then I read the chapter, and I pretty much cried throughout it. But before we talk about the chapter, I want to let you guys know about Revujo's shop. Revujo, the artwork that you see in the video, the speed art, he draws that. He is awesome. You can follow him on Twitter, but you can also go to his shop and buy prints. This week's is amazing. I'm sure you've already seen the thumbnail, but if you happen to overlook it and you're watching the video, behold. Support our Nakama who's been drawing weekly art for forever. Now go do that. Click, click, click. Okay, this chapter made me cry. Didn't make me tear up. No, seen a lot of people, it almost made them cry. I pretty much cried the whole damn time. There's been people saying throughout the art that they didn't feel any connection to Wano itself, the scabbards, the samurai, Momonosuke, the children, Toko, and Tama. But throughout this whole thing, I have never felt that way. I thought that they were really strong characters, and this chapter kind of cemented that feeling. It's like now we've gone through it, we've reached the end, and good lord, the payoff was there. Momo's speech was top tier in a way that is really difficult to explain. Like, a lot of people have series that they like or they recommend to me, and I watch it, and I may or may not like it. And then they may ask, what about it, prevents it from being like the best? And the answer usually comes down to moments like these. The subtle nuance of the word choice matters night and day. And I cannot explain to you what about it works or doesn't. I can't. I can only tell you when I see it and tell you when I feel it. There's approximately a million ways that this chapter could have gone down with essentially the same content, and I think in the vast majority of those million ways, I am not bawling my eyes out. And this quite honestly could have been a greater feat than normal because I was so ready to be mad. In fact, there's still things about this arc, hanging plot threads, some of these things may be addressed, but I have a lot of reasons that things feel underwhelming to me. They feel inconclusive, and there may be a reason for that, there may not, but that feeling remains. And then we begin this chapter with Kinemon's return. I know that a lot of people say, well, people in One Piece don't die, and those people, they appear to be right. There was many chances that Kinemon could have died, and he didn't. There will be people who tell you with absolute certainty that this is bad writing, that Oda has made a mistake in not killing Kinemon. And those people are definitely wrong. And the reason they're wrong is because whether or not you enjoy a character's death, whether or not that fits within the story, its themes, or, your vision is totally subjective. Stories don't have to cater to your views to be good. It'd be like if you took real history, right? That's what stories are all based on in part. Real history. And then you're like, going through history, nah, it would have been better if that guy died. Then I would have really been into it. It's like, sure, maybe for you, but the story is what the story is. Then it kind of relates to how the story is told so that the things that happen consistently pay off. And I felt that way when Kinemon returned from the very beginning of the chapter and in his interactions with Momonosuke. To me, I felt the beats unravel. It created this uplifting sensation which permeated the whole chapter. If Kinemon had died, I would have liked that a lot more. I do think that fake out deaths take something from the story that I personally can't get back, but that is my experience. All this being said, it is my preference, and so Oda has to fight uphill for me in this chapter. And not only did he succeed, he freaking blew it out of the park. From the moment that Momonosuke started to speak, I had literal chills. And then Oda begins to pan to the various people of Wano, whose circumstances I felt and resonated with, and the feeling only grew. But the first moment which really broke me was Tama and her mini flashback. We see her parents died because of factory work. She's now an orphan, but she continues on living, trying to be strong. She makes hats. Nobody wants to buy the hats except for Tengu Yamahitetsu. Man, oh man, oh man. This may just be me placing meaning where it doesn't actually exist, but I kind of like to think about the hats representing hope. Because, you know, they're straw hats, right? Relates to our heroes, the main characters. And so nobody has hope. Nobody buys the straw hats except for Tengu Yamahitetsu. And immediately as he does, he gives Tama hope. And I don't know, was that intentional? But I feel like it was. But as a brief aside here, seeing Tengu Yamahitetsu again reminds me of some of the things that he said earlier in the story. Like, we had the impression he couldn't leave the village that he stayed in. And of course, we know that that's not true because he visited the flower capital, but it was an interesting choice to have Tengu Yamahitetsu not participate in the battle at all, even though he potentially could. I still feel like there's some mysteries here that I don't fully comprehend. It probably won't amount to anything, but as I saw him again, I was reminded. One thing actually that I would like to see is some confirmation, and this will probably come in an SBS, I would figure, but confirmation of whether he's a human or he's an actual Tengu, or some sort of creature or something weird, you know, because he has wings and he wears what appears to be a mask with a long nose, but if he takes off the mask, is the long nose still there, you know? These are things that of personal curiosity to me. And I will say this, some of the story beats that surrounded Tengu Yamahitetsu haven't amounted to much of anything so far. I'm talking about cursed swords, I'm talking about potentially Odin's sword that Zoro used, some of its effects, things of this nature. This particularly cursed swords though, you kind of would expect that this subject would have played a greater role during the fight against Kaido, or if it did, that it would need some sort of explanation, some setup, so we could potentially get more Tengu Yamahitetsu before we leave. What happened to the Nidai Katetsu? Was there any purpose for Luffy having used it and then lost it? And then what about the Shodai Katetsu? Is that going to come up as well? But anyway, back to Tama. You can see how hope played a role for her personally. She hears that the Kozuki are going to return from Tengu Yamahitetsu, and she says, is that really true? Then I'll keep going. I'll be okay. And this is a philosophy that I resonate with very strongly. Without faith and hope in the interim, what you create is somebody like Ashura Doji, who seemingly lost that. And as this occurred, he became part of the problem, right? He was a bandit that took from other people and compounded an already tough existence. And speaking of Ashura Doji, we don't actually see him in this chapter. Talk about Toki's prophecy and the 9 shadows. Well, 2 of the 9 red scabbards weren't here. Obviously, Kanjuro and then Ashura Doji, replaced by Shinobu and Hiyori. So while the chapter didn't have any deaths from characters that you could have expected, like Kiku or like Kinemon, Ashura Doji, it is still technically possible. The scene continues with Tama crying, and then I think that these are Nami's thoughts. But Tama, don't celebrate like this is something special. By the time we leave this country, it'll be a place where you can eat as much as you want every single day. Oh, and then they showed Luffy as well. I mean, good God. And then Momo announces their victory over the Beast Pirates. Which, at this point, I'm just eating the chapter up. There was a panel of Kid where he looked kind of salty. Our alliance, so I think that we can still expect something more from the Kid Pirates and their rivalry with the Strats sometime in the future, which I'm excited for. And actually, there is a somewhat similar reaction from Law as well. What you know gets me giddy about drama? And then there's a pause in the speech because Momonosuke doesn't know what to say, and he turns to Kinemon like, what do I do? And Kinemon's just, do it, man, just say something. And he takes a deep breath, and I think he just says what's on his mind. My name was given to me by my father. It means second to none. That line in particular, it means second to none. Boom, I'm just done. Destroyed totally and absolutely. I cannot explain why, but we talked about this before, about the potential parallels between Ace and Momonosuke, where Ace rejected his name and his father, and we can see the exact opposite here. I still think that there's some meaning there. But he continues saying, I swear to live up to that by restoring this country's barren lands to the paradise they once were. But I'll need you to lend me your strength. And at this moment, you really start feeling like overwhelming joy and pride for the growth that Momonosuke has gone through. I know it's just words and not actions, but the words themselves is a major stepping stone for Momonosuke. If you recall back to when Kaido was holding him as a child and he just was shocked silent. Something similar actually happened in the Whale Tree, where it was a big deal for Momonosuke to ask for help. And then you have this line in this chapter, but I'll need you to lend me your strength. He's asking for help, this time without having been told to ask. Overall, I get the impression from Momonosuke that he doesn't want that responsibility. He doesn't want that burden. He doesn't want that expectation because he doesn't feel he can measure up to it. But here, regardless of his fear, he's embracing it, which again is a step by itself. And then we get a huge panel where we see Momonosuke age for the first time. He says, Wano will be led by me, Kozuki Momonosuke. And he just looks, I thought that he would look like someone else. That's the impression that I had from Shinobu when she first saw him. I'm not sure if he looks like Odin at all or anybody, but for damn sure, he looks epic. And man, the narrator is just on point always. The language is just, it's something that I don't think that I could ever measure up to. Sakura petals dance in a future sky, where warriors can finally rest their blades. A man, 8 years of age, surveys their progress as they drift into the night air of the renowned land of samurai. He may lack physical strength, but he compensates with his devotion to duty and boundless compassion. This man will one day be known far and wide as one of Wano's greatest leaders. We have just borne witness to the birth of the great shogun, Kozuki Momonosuke. With the panel of him walking into the shrine or the palace, absolutely breathtaking. Now there's still a lot of things that I desire from this arc, some things that I find to be necessary, and there's a lot still that is going to go on afterwards, but I can pretty confidently say that this will remain one of the great moments of One Piece, regardless of my feeling beforehand or what I will feel afterwards. This is just, it feels like the epic conclusion to an arc. Even though the arc isn't over, one thing I am kind of looking at as likely to happen is at some point we should see the dawn, right? That was part of Toki's prophecy, that when 9 shadows over 20 long years, then you will understand the dawn. So I'm actually kind of expecting to see like the dawn, and we're in night time, so obviously at some point it will be day. So it didn't happen here, so I presume it's going to happen as the Strats leave in some way, like the sun will rise or something. There's still a lot that could potentially happen before we get there though. I've actually got a really cool theory about this. We're not going to talk about it in this video, and I don't really want to spoil it either. It'll be a standalone theory video for the first time in a really long time, but I kind of, on one half, I'm a little hesitant of theories because of the experience with Wano and managing expectations. Like, I like theories when they either come true or Oda gives us something that is of equal level or even better than, right? But this time I felt like all the fan expectation led to greater promise than really what we got from Wano and the end of the battle up until now. It doesn't take anything away from this chapter, but so I'm a little foot half in and foot half out, but this idea is so cool that I can't help it. But I suppose as a teaser, so you know which subject I'm going to avoid is how the Straw Hats leave and what happens next. But what I do want to say is that there's a lot of strings connecting it and beginning to unravel based on the events of what's occurred here, the defeat of Big Mom and Kaido. And yes, it just seems, I think that both Big Mom and Kaido come out of the lava alive, but what do they do, if anything? I think Big Mom has more role in the story to play, but Kaido, man, it's a tough one to argue. I'm just trying to think about ways in which Kaido comes out of the lava, but still has a cool moment, either because of him or because of someone else. And one of the earliest theories from way before Wano is that Blackbeard is going to take his devil fruit. So that's really the one idea that sticks out to me as, okay, this is what's going to happen to Kaido afterwards, that Blackbeard is actually here or shows up, and then he's the one to finish Kaido, kill Kaido. I don't think it's appropriate for Luffy to kill him, despite that impression having been created. And then we know that he can steal devil fruits, takes Kaido's devil fruit, eats it, and then becomes even more overpowered. To set up Luffy's real final test, the most likely the strongest pirate in the world, the greatest battle between pirates of all time. But aside from this, I think that Big Mom's story is definitely not resolved, and if she just died here, it will be a stain that I may not ever be able to recover from. And also her children haven't done anything, so something needs to happen there. You have the world government, the great cleansing. We're disrupting the established powers, the balance. All of this is going to have resonating effects. You wonder about Caribou and Shirahoshi. You wonder about the world government SSG. We're expecting Vegapunk at some point soon with Devil Fruits. That was mentioned in this arc. Orochi wanted Vegapunk, so I'm very curious to see what happens with Zoro, because despite this being an overwhelming victory, I don't think that if Oda quickly resolves Zoro's situation in some way that doesn't feel insanely clever or emotional or something, I don't know. I'm expecting good things. I'm just saying that it just can't be like, Zoro's healed. This goes along with CP0 being here. What opening the borders of Wano or not opening, what that means, and the consequences or lack thereof of that. Zunisha is waiting patiently to do something. There is a lot left that could potentially blow us away. But as it now actually feels like the end of Kaido's role in the story, I think it's appropriate time for me to talk more in depth about him and about how the end of the battle didn't satisfy me. This is something that I kind of glossed over in the last chapter. We instead talked more about Big Mom than Kaido. But the biggest thing with Kaido is, even as we stand right here, his motivations and his character is unclear. Like, for instance, general question, why does Kaido drink? Why is he a drunk? As he gets drunk, you see these various depressive states, and Kaido, when in some of these, actually attempts to do things which harm him. And so it gives the impression of some depth to Kaido, like maybe there's an event that is of some importance that affects him, and he doesn't show it but does when drunk. Certainly it creates that promise. You can throw whatever speculation you want out there, but the fact is that we don't know. Another element of this is that we got confirmation of sort of who Kaido is as the warrior, why he goes to battle, his enjoyment of that. We saw that in his flashback. But another crucial element of Kaido's philosophy is his belief on death. Why does he think death completes somebody? And why would this not have been revealed before Kaido died? Because that would be a significant moment for Kaido. Another significant thing is sort of his understanding that, hey, I just faced Joy Boy. I mean, technically you can remove it from the story if you want to, but why would you want to? There's so much here. Again, you can throw speculations out there, but I don't think that there's anything really concrete that is just an overwhelmingly obvious answer. A lot of people will mention that these things maybe relate with Rox D. Zebek, and Oda's waiting for these reveals about Rox for a later time. Therefore, these elements of Kaido have been excised and removed. But without question, I think for me, it creates problems for this arc when you don't fully comprehend the villain that you're fighting and, what you're fighting for, what evil you're removing. I think it contributes to this sense of incompleteness, which is, and among other things, makes you wonder whether the battle was finished or not. And also with removal of a lot of what you would think would substantiate Kaido, and then we get his flashback, it feels really rushed because it's not the whole story. Then all of a sudden he's defeated and now we're supposed to believe he's just dead. We'll see where it goes from here, and my thoughts are always subject to change given new evidence or new details in the story, but as of now, I would say that my perspective on Wano is that Wano, for the vast majority of it, was incredible. The majority of Roof Piece, like almost all of it really, from chapter 995 to 1046 when Luffy went Gear 5th, is all peak One Piece. And then the end didn't really satisfy me, and then we're back here with this chapter with that end of arc emotion. But with this alone, I would say that it definitely knocks Wano down a peg in my mind for now. Bearing in mind that we have a situation here kind of like Enies Lobby where they defeat the villain and then more stuff happens afterwards, which could completely elevate it to another stratosphere as well. But as an example of how Oda could potentially resolve my concerns here within the arc in a way that I can foresee, which is not necessarily how it's going to happen, but playing off the Blackbeard theory, right? Kaido is then back in the story. He's alive. He climbs out of the magma. Potentially it's really hype, but you see that he is weakened and he is dying. And you can have some of that reflection moments of him having realized, like, I just fought Joy Boy. Joy Boy was the one who defeated me, and get more perspective about Kaido's thoughts on that. You could also see how he didn't die again and potentially have some exposition as to his value of death and what that means and everything along those same lines. Then you have Blackbeard show up and actually kill him. Another thing as well, while we're still here, that I'm looking forward to is I want to understand Big Mom and Kaido's relationship more. I know that they were both under rocks, but you can do this in a way which removes rocks, so you don't reveal anything about rocks, and it's just Big Mom and Kaido. For instance, when Big Mom gave Kaido the devil fruit, which I presume saved his life. So you could have a scene in which both Big Mom and Kaido come out of the lava together, and we get some closure to that relationship. And I understand that Momonosuke and Vegapunk are both still in the story, so we could get insights into Kaido's devil fruit from those two characters. However, I do really want to see, along with Big Mom giving Kaido the devil fruit and how it saved his life and how he valued it, I want to understand more about it, because I do feel like it is a lingering mystery, and it could be a time to get some insights at the very least, or maybe some hints as to why it's so powerful. Bear in mind here that the world government chose Kaido's devil fruit, to recreate, which by itself signifies great importance more than almost anything else. All it would take is something like this, and I think the vast majority of what I feel like are more objective critiques of the end of this arc would probably vanish, because, Oda drives the ship here in terms of pacing, in terms of when things are revealed. So long as it happens, preferably in the moments in which Kaido is still relevant in the story, then I can understand the vision. And I could see all of this being insanely enjoyable, potentially emotional. But yeah, there's other aspects of the chapter that we still have to discuss. So let's just start off with the big one, right? Yamato joins the Straw Hat crew unofficially. It is actually really interesting that she just sort of like, yeah, I'm joining your crew. And Luffy isn't here to confirm or deny. Jinbei even points it out. But in any world, can I see Yamato being there and Luffy telling her to go away? Like, that's not gonna happen, right? Right? So Yamato joins the crew. I thought that this was one of the things that, unless Yamato died, not that I thought Yamato would die, but unless Yamato died, that had to happen. Or Oda put her through some sort of character arc which would make that, make her desires change. The thing with Yamato that made it such a certainty for me is the inherited will. It was, I'm not sure if it was outright stated, but it was heavily implied that Yamato wanted to go out to sea with Ace, and was waiting for Ace to return, and that never happened. Inherited will. So Ace's brother Luffy arrives. We know that Yamato wants to explore. Kaido is now defeated, so she has no reason to stick around Wano. She wants to go out to sea. She wants to adventure. She wants to be Odin-like. So of course she's gonna join the Strat crew if she is able. A lot of people point to like, oh, Yamato's too strong or other things like this. Not really there with you. I think Yamato's addition to the crew is just spectacularly awesome in almost every way imaginable. I think Yamato is hilarious. I'm excited for interactions with the crew. I think she has the right mentality. I love her powers. I love having Odin on the crew. And I don't know if you can hear that, but the turkeys agree. So almost everything about this is a humongous win. However, there are two things, or maybe three things, which I find curious about this that are worthy of discussion. Now, I love Yamato. I'm so excited for her to join the crew. Don't get this confused in any way. However, this is the weakest new member of the crew joining, potentially ever. And I'm going to give credit to Revujo for this one because it was not immediately obvious to me until we discussed it. So let me take you down memory road, right? When Sanji officially joins the Straw Hat crew, we shed tears. When Chopper officially joins the crew, we shed tears. When Brook officially joins the crew, we shed tears. Jinbei has this awesome moment where, he joins in the middle of one of a very exciting moment. Usopp joining was emotional. Frankie joining was hilarious and emotional. Do you guys see the pattern that is emerging? Well, there are some examples which break the pattern in interesting ways, which we will discuss. Robin joining was a very cool moment because she was previously a villain, but the payoff wasn't initially there, although it was strong for other reasons, kind of like Jinbei. But Nami joining and Zoro joining were definitely not to the same level as everyone else. But you'll notice with these three examples in particular, let's focus on Robin and Nami. Nami officially joined in Arlong Park. She was not a committed member until then. And when she did, when her shackles were broken, we shed tears. Robin was exactly the same. Robin joined, but it wasn't until we dealt with Cypher Pole and her past and her history that she was able to shed whatever doubt that may have lingered about her place. It was also emotional. I'm sure most can agree. And then we have Zoro. I think that this one may be a little bit more debatable, and I'm not certain if it's something that people commonly say, but when I think Zoro's true moment of joining the crew was in Baratie, where he fought Mihawk. I think that you can argue, using hindsight, that Zoro was using the Straw Hat crew as a means to an end. Like, I'm traveling with these people so that I can grow stronger and then become the strongest, face the strongest, no matter the result of that battle or the consequences for everyone else. So his defeat at the hands of Mihawk, his pledge to Luffy and the Straw Hat crew, could be seen as him officially joining. And that moment definitely was emotional. So now we have Yamato, and I think that you have perspective to understand how this moment of her joining is way weaker than all of these, compounded with the fact that we aren't sure what about her past or what about her motivations is going to be fleshed out to give us this astounding moment that we got for literally everybody. But I really hope that we do, because these are all peak One Piece. And so as you bring this up, I think that it makes you think more about Yamato as a character. And again, this goes back to things that feel incomplete. We need a reaction of Yamato to her father's death. That never really seemed to be a thing that we got. Of course, Kaido died, there's this emotional announcement with Momonosuke, but nothing Yamato specific. It also reminds me of her flashback with those samurai. What role that might play could potentially relate to Zoro, something I think that people are kind of looking at as a reveal that would be Wano-centric if ever it's going to happen. Cough, cough, Enma, cough, cough, Shusui, cough, cough, Kitetsu blades. And, like the Grim Reaper. But even more noteworthy than this is Yamato's desire to be Odin. That is not a thing that I can understand, right? There's not enough in the story yet to do anything more than speculate. And you need these things to sort of round it out and have her joining bring more power, besides the hype for her strength or the dynamics going forward. So this is another example where I feel as if Kaido's return from the magma in whatever state could do something really good for the story. We need a final resolution of the relationship between Kaido and Yamato. But the last thing that I want to discuss is, we talked about Yamato joining making sense because of the inherited well. Well, she's not the only character that this is relevant to, because Tama did something very similar with Ace. And I believe that it is very relevant discussion right now as to whether or not Tama asked to join or not. Now, obviously, your opinion on this can differ, and we'll see what we get from the story, but to me personally, if Tama asks Luffy to join and Luffy just says no, it wouldn't feel right. Tama played an integral role in the battle. She didn't shirk any of the danger, any of the drama. She was here, and I think that she's proven herself worthy of being a member of the Straw Hats, even though she is a child. So if Luffy rejects her because of her age, I would be very disappointed by that. Although I guess it's possible. The other thing that Tama could potentially do is, if she is rejected for her age, she may try to do the same thing that has happened to Momonosuke. As she watches Momonosuke here as an adult, she may ask Shinobu to be aged up so that she can join the crew. And that would make sense to me. But it's something that has to be brought up, because she asked Ace to join and Ace said, I can't let you yet. You have to wait until you're an enchanting Kunoichi. But where this discussion becomes really interesting to me is that I have always and forever paired Tama and Momonosuke. They are a group. So it's always been my theory, if you guys were curious as to my thoughts beforehand, I think that potentially, and I know this might sound crazy to some of you if you haven't heard this, but Yamato, Momonosuke, Tama, and Carrot all joined the Straw Hat crew. All of them. Where it's something similar to when Odin joined the crew. Odin had his wife and retainers. Momonosuke has his future wife Tama and retainers Carrot and Yamato. As a side note, I don't want to talk about Carrot all that much, because this also adds in with the things about this arc that I found to be underwhelming. I have to ask myself, if Carrot doesn't join the crew or something doesn't happen with her, then why did she spend so much time in Whole Cake Island, and what's the plan there? Maybe she leads a new division of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet potentially. I think that would satisfy. But either way, I still, aside from her focus in the story, find her to be a fitting member, for several reasons. But back to Tama. If right now it doesn't seem like Momonosuke is going to join the crew, right? But if she does join, until it's, Momonosuke is like very clearly not going to come with them, I would find reasons to argue that he could. Despite this proclamation of him being the Shogun, he's still 8 years old, so we could still have a situation where some sort of interim Shogun is appointed while Momonosuke travels. and then his legacy as the greatest shogun ever will be built after the events of the story. And I suppose another reason why I like this, although it could potentially be resolved at some other point, Momonosuke is not 28 years old, right? He is 8 years old, and he has been aged up 20 years, potentially losing 20 years of his lifespan. So I don't mind that he's aged. I love his design. I think that him as an adult dragon can have uses in the story, but I think at some point he should be aged back to whatever his real age should be. And in order to do that, you can't use Shinobu's powers because Shinobu's powers don't work that way. So I would love if Momonosuke encountered Jewelry Bonnie, and maybe that would work as a fix to re-age him, and maybe something that we can look forward to in the distant future that wouldn't make me kind of sad for him. So this encounter in this circumstance makes the most sense to me if Momo is organically traveling with the crew and we experience a lot of him in the story, as opposed to, you know, Momonosuke shows up for some sort of final battle and Jewelry Bonnie just happens to be there and at the end re-ages him despite not knowing him at all. I hope that this makes at least some sense. I know that people have a lot of preference and they apply their preference as truth, but yeah, I mean, anything can still happen if Oda wants it to happen. Speaking of Tama, we got some clarification on how her fruit works at this chapter, and I think that this was incredibly necessary, that her powers only work for 1 month, which seemed tied to the cycle of the moon, which is a fascinating world building detail, like the double fruit is tied to the moon in some way. Do I think that this is an incredibly important hint to something that we have no way of possibly fully understanding? Yes, I do. But more so as it pertains to the chapter. After a month, her powers stop working and, you know, her followers or her creatures, her slaves, get to choose what they prefer, if they don't like her or if they do. And that's the way that it should be. It also considerably de-hypes Tama's abilities in a way that I actually like. It's still very powerful, particularly, you know, when faced against Smile users, maybe also Double Fruit users, we're not entirely sure, but, you know, it's still a strong ability. And I like the Beast Tamer trope in general. But you also have this time frame here, which makes it a little less overpowered, a little bit more wholesome. So, again, very happy. And the last two things that I want to talk about is the cover story. We can see that the Vinsmoke have escaped from Whole Cake Island. Again, the Big Mom Pirates are just getting bullied at every point in the story. We've talked a lot about this, how I think that it's part of Oda's vision. He's saying a lot about the Big Mom Pirates. You know, they're very exposed. And currently, as it stands, half their members are gone, including Big Mom. They're not a functioning crew. Which I think relates to how the Big Mom Pirates need more time in the story for everything to come back around and not just make a Yonko a joke for the sake of being a joke. There has to be a punchline. And despite the overall feel-good and epicness and tears of the chapter, we do have one panel where Chopper asks, or somebody asks, so is Luffy gonna be okay? His battle was so intense in that form of his, and we immediately cut away from it. But it's a small reminder that, hey, there was things about this battle that, you know, there's still things that we need to do, and we don't know the state of two of the most important crew members. Where do we go from here, and how do we get there? All these things are still really exciting. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much my thoughts about this chapter. It was, I mean, this was an infinity out of 10 chapter, as far as my experience. As always, I'm curious as to what you guys think, whether you noticed something from the chapter that I might have missed. Just share your thoughts. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video, subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day.